Ask 10 different people in industrial real estate to define Class A, and you'll get 10 slightly different answers. Ask 10 people to define Class B, and the answers get even murkier. And yet these two labels drive enormous differences in rent, in tenant demand, and in what a building is actually worth. So it's worth taking the time to understand what these classifications really mean, and more importantly, what specifically separates one from the other. Unlike office buildings, where classification is fairly standardized, industrial classification is looser, more market-dependent, and often argued over between brokers, appraisers, and lenders. But underneath the disagreement, there's a consistent set of physical, locational, and operational criteria that most professionals actually use. Let's walk through them one at a time. The first, and often the most talked about, is clear height, the usable vertical space inside the building, measured from the floor to the lowest overhead obstruction. In most major industrial markets today, a Class A building typically offers clear height of 36 feet or more. Some of the newest, most modern facilities push toward 40 feet. This isn't just a number for its own sake. Every additional few feet of clear height allows a tenant to add another level of racking, which directly increases the amount of product they can store per square foot of land. A Class B building, by contrast, often sits in the range of 24 to 32 feet of clear height. That's not necessarily a bad building. Plenty of legitimate businesses operate happily in that range. But for a large logistics tenant trying to maximize storage density, that difference in clear height can mean a meaningfully lower storage capacity for the same footprint, which shows up directly in their operating costs.
The second major factor is dock door ratio, the number of loading dock doors relative to the building's total square footage. A well-specified Class A distribution center typically offers one dock door for roughly every 8 to 10,000 square feet, allowing multiple trucks to load and unload simultaneously without creating a bottleneck. Many Class A buildings today also include dedicated trailer parking stalls, sometimes at a ratio of one trailer stall for every 1 to 2 dock doors, giving tenants a buffer to stage loaded trailers before they're needed.
A Class B building often has a noticeably lower dock ratio, sometimes one door for every 15 to 20,000 square feet, and considerably less trailer storage. For a tenant running a high-volume distribution operation, that lower ratio can create real operational friction. Trucks waiting longer, less flexibility during peak shipping periods. The third factor, closely related to the first two, is column spacing, the distance between the structural columns that hold up the building. Modern Class A construction typically spaces columns 50 to 60 feet apart, sometimes further, which allows for cleaner, more efficient racking layouts with fewer obstructions breaking up usable floor space. Older Class B buildings were frequently built with columns spaced closer together, often 40 feet apart or less, a legacy of older construction techniques and lower loading requirements. Those tighter columns can meaningfully reduce a tenant's usable racking configuration. The fourth factor is floor loading capacity, how much weight per square foot the concrete slab can support. Class A buildings are typically engineered for floor loads of 500 pounds per square foot or more, sufficient for heavy racking systems and modern material handling equipment. Older Class B buildings were often built to lower specifications, sometimes around 3 to 350 pounds per square foot, which can limit certain heavy-use tenants entirely. The fifth factor, and an increasingly important one, is fire suppression. Modern Class A warehouses are typically equipped with ESFR sprinkler systems, early suppression fast response systems, designed specifically to handle the fire risk of tall racking configurations. Many older Class B buildings still operate with older, less capable sprinkler systems, which can restrict how high a tenant is legally permitted to stack goods, regardless of the building's physical clear height. This is a detail that catches a lot of newcomers off guard. A building might have 32 feet of clear height on paper, but if the sprinkler system only supports racking to 25 feet,
That's the real usable height for a tenant's insurance and fire code compliance.
The sixth factor is power capacity. As warehouses have taken on more automation, robotics, and in some cases electric vehicle charging infrastructure for delivery fleets, electrical capacity has become a genuine differentiator. A Class A facility today is often built with substantially more power capacity than older buildings, sometimes 2 to 3 times the electrical service of a comparable Class B building, specifically to accommodate future automation without requiring costly utility upgrades.
The seventh factor is age and physical condition. There's no single hard cutoff, but as a rough guide, many Class A industrial buildings in a given market were constructed within the last 10 to 15 years, or have been substantially renovated to modern standards. Class B buildings are often 20 to 40 years old, functional, but showing their age in ways that matter. Older roofing systems nearing the end of their serviceable life, aging HVAC and lighting, less energy-efficient building envelopes. The eighth factor is location and access, proximity to major highway interchanges, ports, rail, and population centers. A building with excellent physical specifications but poor highway access will often struggle to command true Class A rent because location constrains how efficiently tenants can actually operate from that site. Conversely, some older Class B buildings command surprisingly strong rents purely because of an exceptional, hard-to-replicate location, particularly in dense, land-constrained submarkets near ports or major urban centers where new Class A construction simply isn't possible.
All of these physical and locational factors roll up into a single, very practical outcome: rent. In most major industrial markets, Class A distribution space typically commands anywhere from 15 to 25% more rent per square foot than comparable Class B space in the same submarket. As an illustrative example, if Class B space in a given submarket leases around $7 per square foot annually on a triple net basis, comparable Class A space in that same submarket might command $8.50 to $8.75, sometimes higher in supply-constrained markets. That rent premium shows up again at sale in the form of a tighter cap rate. Investors are generally willing to accept a lower going-in yield for a Class A asset because of its lower vacancy risk, broader pool of potential tenants, and lower expected capital expenditure over the holding period. It's common to see Class A industrial assets trade half a percentage point to a full percentage point tighter in cap rate than a comparable Class B asset in the same market. For example, a Class A building trading around 5.25%, where a Class B building nearby might trade closer to 6.25%. On a $10 million asset, that single percentage point of cap rate difference can represent well over $1 million in valuation. This is where tenant profile becomes relevant, because Class A and Class B buildings tend to attract meaningfully different types of tenants. Large investment-grade logistics operators, national retailers, and major third-party logistics companies generally gravitate toward Class A space, both because their operations genuinely benefit from the higher specifications and because their brand and insurance requirements often push them toward newer, more compliant buildings. Class B space, meanwhile, tends to attract smaller regional operators, older established businesses that have occupied the same building for years, and tenants for whom rent savings matter more than maximizing every operational efficiency. Neither of these tenant pools is inherently better from an investment standpoint. They simply carry different risk and return characteristics. A Class A building might offer lower yield, but greater income stability and broader appeal at resale. A Class B building might offer a higher current yield, but with more exposure to tenant turnover risk and a narrower pool of prospective replacement tenants if that tenant leaves.
There's also a category worth mentioning that sits between the two and is sometimes called Class B+, or in some markets, functional Class A. An older building that has been meaningfully upgraded. A new roof, improved lighting, added trailer parking, an upgraded sprinkler system, without reaching the ground-up specifications of true new construction. These renovated assets can often command rent close to Class A levels at a meaningfully lower acquisition cost, which has made value-add repositioning of Class B industrial buildings an active investment strategy in its own right.
This raises a natural question. Can a Class B building actually become Class A? In the strictest sense, no. The fundamental bones of the building, its clear height, its column spacing, its floor loading capacity, are largely fixed at construction and extremely expensive to change after the fact. But a Class B building can be substantially repositioned, closing much of the gap in rent and tenant appeal through targeted capital improvements, often referred to in the industry as a value-add strategy.
A typical repositioning might include replacing an aging roof, often $10 to $20 per square foot depending on the system chosen, upgrading the sprinkler system to ESFR standards, adding LED lighting, expanding trailer parking, and improving the building's power capacity. On a 200,000 square foot building, a meaningful capital improvement program along these lines might run $1.5 to $3 million, a significant investment, but one that can sometimes justify a rent increase of $1 or more per square foot and a corresponding jump in valuation that exceeds the capital spent, if executed well in a market with genuine tenant demand for the improved space.
This is also where obsolescence risk becomes important to understand. As tenant expectations rise, driven by e-commerce, automation, and increasingly sophisticated supply chains, the specifications that once defined Class A can shift over time. Buildings with 24-foot clear height, once perfectly acceptable, are increasingly viewed by large logistics tenants as functionally obsolete for their purposes, even if the building is structurally sound and well-maintained. This is a genuine risk for owners of older Class B assets, not that the building fails physically, but that the market's definition of acceptable simply moves past it. For an investor evaluating any industrial acquisition, understanding these classifications isn't just about labeling a building correctly. It's about understanding exactly what you're buying, what it will rent for relative to newer competition, what capital it may eventually require to remain competitive, and how durable its tenant demand will be over a full holding period, not just at the moment of purchase. A Class A building isn't automatically the better investment, and a Class B building isn't automatically the riskier one. What matters is whether the price paid, the rent achieved, and the capital required over time are all realistically matched to which category the building actually falls into, not which category the marketing materials claim it belongs to. This is Trove Estate. The label on a building matters far less than the specifications underneath it. Know what you're actually buying before the classification does the talking for you.